Welcome to another episode of Concentric Educational Solutions podcast, one door at a time, where we talk about the infusion of community, education, and just entrepreneurship. We started part one of this conversation with my guests a couple months ago, and I held off on it to release it because I knew that there needed to be a part two. And I heard a whole lot of feedback about how can we get deeper into the subjects that are important to everybody that tunes in every single week. So I just wanted to hold off on it, and it's very interesting that we come back the day after inauguration to talk about what this new landscape looks like. So I have the distinct pleasure to welcome back part two, and we're going to release them back to back so that y'all don't have to wait for it. Kwame Simmons, who is the CEO of Simmons Advantage. Welcome back, good brother.
Let's go.
I know last time I saw you was in Atlanta. We started talking about it. We laid the groundwork, but we're going to get into deep about the questions, particularly in education and entrepreneurship that we talked about. So for the very first time, I'm going to be looking at questions, and we're going to be delving into topics that we think that will resonate with everybody. So, think about this, man. I know that you started the company, Simmons Advantage. You're growing each and every day. What is your vision for scale? Like, what does scaling the company look like for you?
You know what's interesting, Dave? The first thing is I had to come to grips with understanding that just because I understand education didn't equate to understanding growing a business. Yeah. And so developing the business then created an entirely new skill set that required new studying, new commitments, and new knowledge. And so what I initially thought skill was the opportunity to get contracts, right? Just getting a contract I thought was scaling. Well, I don't even think I was using that word. I thought it was consulting. Right? Just being able to consult was synonymous with business. Yeah. And so like you and I, talk a lot about it. It's like, hey man, you might be consulting, you got 4 or 5 gigs. That's $12,000, bro. Think about what your salary was in your previous job. Yeah. That's not a lot. And so, you took some pictures, you signed some autographs, but ultimately it's not translating. And so what I had to realize, and it took COVID to really, to sit with me, is to say, look, you got to stop being an employee of your business and become an owner. And when that light switched, it was game time. And so I think, where I am now in terms of scale is being able to understand what percentage of the market I can take advantage of. Being really clear about the territories where we can capitalize in terms of being able to make sense for the business. And then being realistic around how much revenue is actually in those places where we have strong territory and what's realistic for us to be able to get a share of that market. And so initially that's our skill. So we're looking at, from our previous year, anywhere from, 2 to 5x, increase of revenue from last year. So it is a serious commitment because everyone that's employed has 90-day plans that, for each quarter. In each of those quarters, I'm asking them to generate anywhere between 8 to 10x. And so one of the things that I'm pushing, and they don't realize this, is I was looking at part of my study was looking at Shark Tank. Yeah. And so when looking at Shark Tank, I really love that, to see how people pitch their businesses, but I really like to study the sharks and what kind of feedback they give. And there was an episode where a woman, young woman, she was really bright and she was sharing something, and Barbara, the shark, she said, hey, I'm in. Whatever her equation was, that she wanted them to invest in, lady said, she said, yes, I'm in. Lady started talking more because some of the other sharks started talking to her, and what she realized was the lady said, yeah, and the reason this last manager quit was they weren't doing something. So Barbara said, wait a minute, tell me more about why the manager quit. And so she said, yeah, they didn't do this, or, and they didn't do that. She says, hey, okay, I got you. I'm clear. So here's the deal. I'm out. So I'm taking my offer back.
Oh, Barbara dipped.
Yep. She said, I'm taking my offer back. She said, but I'm going to give you this advice. She says, I live by an 80-20 rule. That I expect people to complete 100% of the tasks, but I'm willing to accept 80. And so the reason why you keep having managers quit is because you only expect 100% like it's their company. You're the only person who's only going to have the 100%. But you got to be willing to know what the 20 is that
you're
you're willing
willing to
to
take on.
Yep, that you're willing to give a pass on.
Yep.
And so for my team, I'm giving them the 8 to 10x because you got to hustle.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to be willing to accept 5 to 8, quarter 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I want you to realize that in order for you to be here, you got to be hustling and producing outcomes to actually be here.
So when you start redefining what scalability is, right? Like, what do you think is the greatest opportunity in education about that to scale?
I'm gonna be honest with you, special education.
Yeah.
I think that because special education has so many regulations,
Mm-hmm.
people shy away from it. And so there are very few people who like to touch on that space. But one of the things that I realized is that over 80% of school districts are leaving Medicaid reimbursements on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of the agreement between school districts and the federal government that then passes it down to states is that they have the ability, once students get an IEP and they get related services, OT, PT, all of those
speech
related,
and language,
all of those things, they're reimbursable.
Mm-hmm.
So those become additional funds that districts could be using. So I think that there are opportunities for companies to come in and be able to provide the execution of those services for many districts that I know. Even as an educator, I didn't even know that was
no, I didn't know.
place.
No, I didn't know when you were telling me about it.
Yeah, so I think that's a huge growth opportunity.
So we go back before scalability, right? Yeah. Before the light clicked on. What made the light clicked on and said, "Fuck it, I'm all in. Yeah. I'm not a consultant. Like this is a legit business." Because this is what's interesting is that I'm 16 years in the game, so I'm OG in this. And most people talk about I'm a consultant, but they can't feed their family off it, pay their bills. You've made the switch. Like, was it coming out of COVID that you were like, this is what I know I can do? Or was it before going in?
I think a couple of things at the same time. That many times as an employee, if you don't like a job, especially if you're pretty good at the job, you always got a plan B. I'm kind of here, I'm kind of there. Yeah. And so I made the decision that my plan B was going to be plan A.
Facts.
And so I said, look, you got to double down here. And so I started thinking about where did I have that before? So as a, former athlete, it's like, look, you can't get in the middle of the game and now all of a sudden you want to, go over to the scores table and reset the clock. You got to play the game now. We already started. This is where we are. You got to do what's necessary in order to finish and get the outcome you want. And so what I realized then was, look, double down, bro. And so I got on the phone and started calling people. Where before I was kind of tiptoeing, hey, do you have contract? Do you have this? I started calling people, man, and say, hey, look, man, I know we're not in school. I need a contract. What we gonna do? How much do you have? When can we do it? And so my pitch became stronger and I became much more aggressive, right? Like it was time at this point to like really do it. And so, because what I realized is many people also struggle to make the shift with me to a new place where my intellectual property used to be free to them, right? Like we talk, be on the phone and share ideas, as colleagues, but now that I have a business, intellectual property, yes.
You got to pay for that time.
But I think their struggle sometimes is it's not coming out of your pocket though. It's your business, right? You work for a district or something. Right. And so you can make that adjustment. You can make that shift. You can get the PO and make sure that we can, kind of partner there. So I think that was the big shift. And I did have, I had some no's from people out that surprised me, but I got yeses out of people that surprised me as well. So I think that was the shift. And ever since then, I just didn't look back.
So kind of thinking about that is, and this is going to tie into a couple of different questions. One, the strategic partnerships and what that clearly defines and define that, and then bringing people along with you. Like how has that been deciding who to strategically partner with?
It's interesting. I think I always try to look for folk to partner with who I believe have a mentality about the way they approach the work, the way that I do. That's just something that just kind of like triggers and motivates. And it doesn't really matter what industry. So for example, TD Jakes. So TD Jakes, I really like to listen because, he's someone who had humble roots coming from West Virginia,
Yep.
that grew mega churches,
Yeah.
right? Multiple authored books. But he said something that I think I pick up on, which actually two things I share. The first thing is he said, I don't, when people hate, I don't tell people to tune out the haters that people say.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I say turn them down.
Mm-hmm.
So you, because sometimes they say something that you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to me that's a high quality. You got to be reflective. You can't be the boss and be so tuned out that only what you say matters. You got to be able to hear what the haters say. You got to be in tune to that, to say, oh, okay, that could be a weak spot. I didn't see that part coming. The other thing is, that kind of touches on that. He talked about, and this is a big viral video he had with Oprah. He said the difference between a turtle and giraffe, that the turtle and the giraffe both share the same geography inside the jungle, right? But the difference is that the turtle kind of moves through the grass at a certain level. But it's the giraffe who sees the jungle from a completely different perspective. And when you're the giraffe, you can't move with a turtle perspective. Because it says when the giraffe comes down, and if it were to try and live that way, it's got this big 25-pound heart to pump blood all the way up that neck to get there. And if it continued to stay down for too long, it will pass out. And so to understand that your role though as the giraffe, as the leader, is to be up here. You got to be able to see. You got to set the vision, but you got to be able to keep these turtles and things in line so that they come along. It's no disrespect to that perspective, but some people just can't be here.
And that's a very hard lesson for people to understand and learn. Like everyone's not called to be a giraffe. Yeah. And it doesn't make necessarily the turtle is necessary for the ecosystem, just like the giraffe is. Everyone can't be the giraffe. Right. And that's a hard lesson for people, even people who have been in leadership positions. But, and this is what I say, humbly, is one of my mentors that has shaped my professional career and personal is Freeman Hrabowski, right? President of UMBC, internationally known, respected, whatever the case may be. But he did that in the confines.
And a Hampton grad.
And Hampton grad.
And I thought that's why you wore the colors in his
honor. Oh, no. I was just trying to cover up this neck that I have, right? But like real talk, man, is that, and I say this to people, you can be like that, right? But you're getting a check every 2 weeks.
Facts.
How about you don't know if you're getting a check do you have the stamina if you don't know you're going to get paid at the end of the week, right? It takes a different level of resolve, right? And so, to speak about the partnership now is what I see is my role now is the people, because I remember like when we first met, I was like, damn, this brother is really, really sharp. And what's going to happen is you're so sharp and good. The people that when you were in colleagues with, where you share that intellectual property, when then they have to pay for it, all they're going to wonder is, how come I can't get paid? Because they're not you.
Right.
They can't do what you're able to do and what you're willing to suffer. So we were talking about this before you came in. Nah, school's closed back in the D, right? Hell, it's cold as hell here in Baltimore. You still got on a plane, right? Because there's something bigger, right? And so when you start thinking about those partnerships, and when we start thinking about those partnerships, the hardest thing for me was realizing the people I wanted to partner with, I wanted it more than that they wanted it for themselves, right? That's who I wanted to bring along with me. And the ones that I thought would celebrate my success were hampering my growth.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a fundraiser in LA. A mentor of mine, and I'll give a big shout out, Steve McKeever. So Steve McKeever founded Hidden Beach.
Okay.
Was also discovered Jill Scott. So we were out at a fundraiser together years ago in LA, and he said, look, you could come into a space like this, right? And ask a person for like $5,000. They'd be like, yeah, no problem. And I was like, at the time, like, straight up, that's a lot of money, right? He said, yeah. He said, but, and if that resonates with you as a lot of money and they don't give it to you right away, you might come back to them again before you leave. It's like, we good on the 5,000, you gonna get it? And he was like, see, that's offensive in this environment.
Yes.
Because the tickets to this fundraiser was 10.
Yeah.
So if a person can afford to pay 10,000 for the ticket, it was just a dinner.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't like nothing fancy or nothing like that, but it was a political fundraiser. And so that sat with me. And so it's like now when we target our clients, I look for clients who have a budget that fits our pricing. Because what I find is that some folk, if their budget is so slim and trim, they do what you just described, right? They what about this? And what about that? But those who have a budget that has enough cushion, they don't see that as territorial or in conflict to their fiscal obligations. They see it as something that helps to extend their capacity. And so that's a tough thing to swallow, because you balancing, hey, making the bill and taking a lower amount, but the long-term effect of people who penny pinch, who keep grabbing and grabbing, costs you more. Yeah. Because it starts to pull on your margins. No. You can't send Kwame, I want Dave only. Yeah. Right? And so everywhere you plant your feet costs, right? That meter is running, but they say they want you. No. You have concentric. And I dictate that. But some of those folks, sometimes they don't realize that. So that was a tough thing to swallow in terms of partnerships, is that some of them that we had in our earlier days, I don't do that, right? Yeah. It's like, hey, I can't, but I can refer you to someone though. Yeah. I got somebody that you could.
It's like being the founding partner of a prestigious law firm, right? I can send one of my associates. You can't get me no more. Yes, but I mean, it's interesting. So let's speak about entrepreneurship, that shift. It was a shift to me. Like, I think I've always been entrepreneurial in spirit, but being trained as an educator as opposed to being trained as an entrepreneur. What was that shift like for you? What's that journey looking like for you?
I think for me, entrepreneurship has always been in me. I think just the way in which we came up in my neighborhood, in Michigan, you can recycle bottles. Yeah. And so I always collected bottles. I go over, down the street, cut grass with the push lawnmower, and take the bottles as the payment to the store. And so I always realized there was potential currency exchange for services delivered. So I always thought, so I clean out a person's basement, clean out their garage, always to try and get something. But I think that's the hustle part of entrepreneurship. But I think the true essence of the entrepreneurship had to be elevated. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Are you just hustling and getting little bits, or are you creating an enterprise? Or are you creating a business that's sustainable and can actually make payroll each time, right? That's sustainable. You got enough revenue that's coming in where you can project beyond a fiscal year. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like those kinds of things. And so I think that's where, so I think that earlier stage, I kind of always had that, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it was COVID. I think it was COVID that was really like when the light switch hit for me. Like, nah, you gotta really dig down. You gotta make these projections. Look at your budget versus actuals, looking at the financials and saying, what are the projections? And so one of the things that we realized was it was our fourth quarter, that we would have really big third quarters and everybody be all excited of the fiscal year, but then the third quarter would dip. And so we started looking at the trends and say, oh, that's when schools come back in. So right around that time when they start to come in, everybody's like, hey, wait, wait. And then they want to re-engage October, but nothing drops.
Because fiscal quarters don't align with school calendars.
Light out, bro.
Right? So the shit that you see, you'll see a big bump November, December, January. Yes. Because motherfuckers are start doing something in October and November. But then your actuals, you'll see in June, July, because this the stuff that you delivered on in May and June, right? Yes. But that slow part, like, yes, no.
But if you're not paying attention to the financials, you're not really looking. That's what I mean about that growth to being like the owner. You gotta be watching that, right?
Yeah.
You got to be looking at that bottom line and seeing, because what'll happen is you start eating what you don't kill.
Yes.
Right. And so you
Yes.
see like, oh, this quarter was here. There's this large piece of revenue, but you're not saving and storing because you got a quarter that's coming up that's about to be a storm. It's about to be a dry spell.
Yes.
But you like, oh no, we good.
Mm-hmm.
And I seen, we've been victim of that. Like, oh, because at the end of the summer, like, oh, we're gonna take a vacation or we're gonna shut down and slow down. No, that's the time to ramp
That's
up.
the grind time.
Yeah, that's the time to ramp up.
So like there was and I was thinking about this on the plane last night. I was like, this is how I know, because you're very, what I've observed about you is you're very observant. Ever since I've met you, we're on a decade now, right? Like if you're entertaining somebody, but if they're not serious, you don't treat them seriously, right? Like that's my like my impression and what I've seen, right? So when like I reached out and for you to come to Atlanta, and I knew you had something back to back, and I was like, hey, he's coming down this joint. Like even I was like, yo, let's get on part 2. Those are small indicators to me, right? That won't show up on KPIs or anything like that. That someone else is taking me seriously, who I greatly admire, right? And those are the small successes that I'm like, okay, I'm still kind of on to something. And similar to your point, where you talk about rooms, I was in a room with a music executive, and it was he wanted to do some foundational work and stuff like that. And this is a dude that was kind of big time, right? And so it was an initial dinner. It was like 5 of us, right? And then it was only scheduled to go 30 minutes to an hour at the most. And we're like 90 minutes in. And he asked like I guess his chief of staff to leave, asked me for my chief of staff to leave. And he was like, what do you really want to do? And I'm like, damn, I haven't been asked that question for a little bit. He was like, yeah, I could fund something like that in my foundation. He was like, come back when you have something bigger and better. And it switched again. I'm like, it keeps being levels to those different rooms. So almost like the Hall of Fame. Like you get into the hall, that's one thing, but there's a room or a door back there that's reserved for the greats. And it takes it takes a different criteria. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned right now so far as an entrepreneur?
So I would say, before I get there, something triggered when you said that about, he said, come back with something bigger and better. So I had a mentor of mine. I think he's, I got a lot of respect for him. John Hans, he's runs a financial services in Michigan. And so a couple of things that he said, and one of them was, he said, you an entrepreneur? I said, yeah. He said, would you work 40 hours a week? So I was like, yeah. He's like, what about 50? Like, yeah. He was like, 60? I'm like, man, I'll work as long as it takes. He was like, good. He was like, and you gonna work, and and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna work until I get it. He said, yeah, so here's the difference between me and you. That you're gonna work to 60. I'm gonna go and find 60 people to work 60. And so that again was like a nugget that he dropped around where my mind was. And this was years ago. So I wasn't catching that's enterprise development, right? Like if I got all of these people doing that same level of hustle, and if I can impart what I have into them, it's going to increase the amount. So instead of me trying to run and be in all these places, I can just drop it on all of them. So I was like, wow. And that still resonated. Another thing he said to me was, one of the benefits that you have is that you are trained to really care for people, being an educator. Yeah. But because of the industry that you're in, you have a deficit in terms of an urgency around business. Because every year the school doors are gonna open. So money just shows up. He said, it just shows up. He said, that's not how it is in the real world. He's like, there is a sense of urgency. He says, but if you're gonna get into business, you wanna be an entrepreneur, monetize your knowledge. And so as I was going into the development of the Simmons Advantage, I'm always in there. So in the mornings I get up and I read, and I'm always thinking about, what do I know? What did I learn? And I'm trying to jot things down, because what we do is 3 different things. It's organizational change work, which is like around school improvement and large scale initiatives, and leadership development, which is where it started, because that's what I wanted to do. Because I was like, I want to give to others what I wish they would have given to me. But what I did not realize was the amount of time that I had and learned about special education.
Mm.
And so monetizing that, then develop our workforce development program for high school kids with special needs.
Mm.
Unequivocally, that's what makes people say, eyes pop open. Every
Yeah,
time
yeah,
I say that
yeah.
part right there, they're
Mhm.
like, tell me more. So similar to
Mhm.
what this guy said. And so that's why I was like, so it has had me digging more around scale, around those kinds of supports
Mhm.
for that need, because no matter what audience, what industry, when I say that part right there,
Mhm.
they're like, they're hooked in.
And see, I've had the similar experiences that the market or my potential clients and current kind of pushed me to kind of really dig deep into my one, right? Everyone wanted to do executive coaching. Like everybody in the world wants to do that, right? And it's the market is flooded with that. But if you can get that one and you define it and continue to innovate it and get it better and better each and every time, that becomes it. Like Apple's one is the iPhone.
Yep.
Everything else, it doesn't fucking matter.
That's right.
It's the iPhone.
Facts.
Because everybody has to have an iPhone.
Facts.
You have an iPhone, it makes sense to have a watch. If you don't have an iPhone, why are you getting the fucking the watch? Right? Like so. I mean, so that is kind of what I learned. So let me end up over there. Legacy. Your business. What do you see your business, the Simmons Advantage, as the legacy? What legacy do you want to live?
You know, that's an interesting point. I think there are a few layers to that. One, I want to be able to leave an imprint on my family. I want them to know that all of this hard work, all of this effort went into being able to create opportunities for not only them, but their children. Because too many times I think for Black people, particularly African Americans, is we don't get the privilege, the license to think generationally, to goal set beyond our own existence. And so I think to be able to do that will help benefit them in ways that might take them half their life to understand the impact of it. And so that's one, is to create generational wealth and opportunity, I think, to match. I think the next is to be able to target school populations and actually have something to disrupt the school to prison pipeline. I don't think people really understand the magnitude of that impact, because one of our new initiatives is to partner with the Department of Corrections, because the Department of Corrections has their own schools that don't match with the Department of Education. So that means that there's schooling and education and pedagogy that's happening, but how are they being trained? And so if we know that 75% of Black and brown boys had an IEP that are in prison, how do we, if we're going to be working in schools, then address the culminating impact of not having quality teachers? So being able to connect, I think that there's research and outcomes there that I think will be very impactful for people to be able to study from and understand, because I think it's an invisible virus that people aren't like trying to develop medicine to address. So I would say those two things for me at this stage resonate most for me at this stage. But the other thing is, this don't last forever. You know, we were talking about before around the well. Like, I don't feel like I did 15 years ago, right? In terms of like the energy, like you get up, bro. I tell people I get up in stages, bro. I wake up like, you know, all right, move an arm, move this, like, okay, I got a little something in this leg today. You just wake up with aches, bro. You learn, you know, as you get a little bit older, but your mind is sharp from the wisdom and experience. And so I think to appreciate the opportunity that we have. I don't see it as much of a problem, but as a privilege to be able to solve these complex problems and have the ability to do it. I think is something that I don't take for granted as much at this stage.
I mean, it's, like you said, it's different. Like, I like the way that you explain, you know, generational wealth, but the caveat is generational opportunity. And I didn't think about I employ my son, right? I've been able to employ my son, and my daughter have done internships with me. Them getting to see that it's a possibility out there. It's nothing. It's new for us as African Americans, but with white folks, it's been there historically, right? Like this is something that they kind of go into. One of the thought I had before is that, the content you're dropping about the results that you're having is truly compelling. Like it really is. It draws us. It draws the audience in, man. And I felt like here was the switch. 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, I'm like, wow, like that's competition, right? Now what I see is collaboration and excitement for that next level of entrepreneur who can take it, man. And that's what I see so exciting from what you've been doing and stuff like that. And in addition to this is what I would say to all the school districts out there, right? Stop closing doors and saying we have this. If you would have had it, you would have fixed it, right? So why not try something different and something new and someone else new, as opposed to the same organizations that give you half-assed results in the first place, as opposed to trying a new approach with new ideology, new thinking, and new commitment, man. So I want to thank you, brother. Thank you for taking that bird out here. That's what you used to call it when I was like, yo, you better get on that bird.
Yes, sir.
And just thank you for your commitment, but thank you for the energy and the innovation that you're bringing into this space, man. Always, brother. Appreciate you,
man.
No, absolutely.
Yes, sir.
As always, you can. I want you. Thank you for tuning in. You can get all our content on concentric.world. Thank you for tuning in. Our last podcast got the most views, so I think we're doing something right after over 65, 70. Shout out to our partners and sponsors, Atlas Restaurant Group, all over the DMV area. In Houston, I just visited a lock bar there. Mercedes-Benz of Catonsville, thank you for putting me in the S580. Rides unbelievably. Until next time, I'm your host, David Heiber. Concentric, one door at a time. See you.